Welcome to the Indian Gaming Association's The New Normal webcast. My name is Lisa Johnson. I'm the conference manager for the Indian Gaming Trade Show and Convention. I'd like to share a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Everyone is muted by default except for our speakers. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Victor Rocha, conference chairman of the Indian Gaming Association.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to New Normal, your go-to source for discussions on the gaming industry and key issues facing Native American tribes across the United States. I'm Victor Rocha, Conference Chairman of the Gaming Association. My co-host is not going to be here today, Jason Childs. He's in DC taking care of tribal business. So I'm going to be going solo today, but I'm joined by two very good friends of mine. First, we're joined by Dominic Ortiz, CEO of Potawatomi Casinos and Hotels. Good morning, Dominic.
Good morning, Victor. Glad to be
Good.
here.
Love, so wonderful having you. And of course, our dear friend Scott Crow of Curl Offices, Tribal Advocacy Group. We're here to discuss the growing controversy over Wisconsin sports betting bill and why tribes are pushing back against the Sports Betting Alliance's opposition to the legislation. So, first of all, let's give people context. Dominic, Scott, welcome. Dom, tell us about this bill and what just happened. I believe it was yesterday, right?
Absolutely. Thank you, Victor. And well, look, Wisconsin, what's happening? Familiar scene. So here in Wisconsin, the tribes are working together to support the hub and spoke model under Senate Bill 592. So we've got bipartisan support and pushed that first piece of the legislature through. And we had our hearing yesterday, Victor. And at that hearing, who showed up? Guess who registered at the 11th hour? The Sports Betting Alliance. And what we're here to talk about is really their comments were quite frankly insulting, Victor.
Wow.
I currently am the number one regional entertainment destination in the Midwest. We do arguably have the number one retail sports book in the country. We have phenomenal leadership of gaming and hospitality for 30 years with tribes here in Wisconsin. And what SBA came to the table and said, what they told us is that you're not capable to run this market. You don't have the skills and the technology to be able to meet the consumer needs. And quite frankly, SBA is set back as to why no tribe reached out to us. They apparently feel that their track record is in support of what we're doing, and we just don't see that, Victor. So yesterday they showed their face, they showed their greed, in our opinion, by insulting us and the tribes in Wisconsin that we're incapable when we're running one of the number of retail sports books in the country. So that's the landscape that's happening right now. They didn't reach out to any tribes, they didn't reach out to any co-authors, but you know what they did, Victor? They went ahead and filed against our legislation just right out the gates, letting us know that they just don't feel we're capable.
I saw that. You know what I mean? I mean, there wasn't really any consultation and stuff like that. This is just coming in opposition. And Scott, this is pretty aggressive for them. But we've seen this across the country, haven't we?
Oh, it's deja vu, over again. They, tried to do the same thing with against the California tribes, and wound up, being on the wrong end of one of the worst initiative defeats in California legislative history by trying to circumvent the tribes. And it was a lot of the same rhetoric. Another aspect of the deja vu is, I remember, back in the late 80s and early 90s, and the Nevada Resort Association saying, oh, these tribes don't know what they're doing. They don't have the wherewithal. They can't do it without us. And, here we are, 35 years later, where, tribes, are more than half the market, and oftentimes, beat out the large commercial operations in terms of being the best run, and both from the operational side and the patron side. The notion that DraftKings and FanDuels are the only ones that know how to successfully operate an online sports betting platform is frankly bogus. And so in some respects, I think they might have done us all a favor by coming out, with their rhetoric on the front end instead of, what they've been trying to do in other states is, pretending to be the tribe's friends and partner and having the tribe's interest at heart when all they're looking at is their own bottom line and their need to take the lion's share of the revenue. The one remark that jumped out at me the most in yesterday's opposition was their statement that, because the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, restricts them to somewhere underneath, 40% of the net revenue of what they raise, that they just simply can't live with that numbers. Tells you what's really at stake here is, this is all a play for, them to try to take the lion's share of the revenue, not really realizing that, as in Wisconsin and a number of other states around the country, that it's the policy decision has been made to support tribal governmental gaming, where the revenue stays with the tribes and the revenue is spent by the tribes in their local communities because they're not going anywhere, as opposed to siphoning off the revenue to some, Delaware corporation.
Scott, thank you very much. I mean, we've seen this before, and I was kind of surprised yesterday because I thought the relationship was a little more open at this point. And Dominic, you say that there was no consultation and they just filed against this bill instead of saying, "Hey, maybe there's something we can work here." Tell us a little bit about the bill. Now, there's yesterday we were listening to what SB 592, right?
Yes. Yes,
And
that's
there's
correct.
and there's two bills. Am I correct?
Yes, both bills. Overall, Victor, what we're laying the groundwork for is to simply bring the hub and spoke model forward and to ensure that the statutes in the state permit us to operate under that hub and spoke as we move forward to continue down that path. We all know that at the end of the day, this is only one part of the step. We still have to work through the compact and we have to work through the BIA ultimately.
Well, you know what, and I think that's a really good point is that, we're still in the early stages of this, and that's why it seems to me it just would not be helpful to be in opposition at this point against the tribe because, you're obviously upset about this, and what I've seen and what I've heard across Indian country over the last 24 hours has been, people are angry about this. It just seems unnecessary at this point and such early in the game. So Dominic, tell us about the bill and what does this bill mean for tribes?
Yeah, so for us, this does clarify that the two servers on the reservation under the hub and spoke model will be on each tribe has that opportunity to make that business decision. And then of course, just the fundamental framework that anybody that is on the spoke outside that reservation is not violating any state constitution by participating in gaming. So at the end of the day, we're laying that framework of hub and spoke and continuing to partner with the state to, just as you've seen, we have operating in this market feel that, we can best benefit it by recirculating the money, keeping the money in here. I thought Scott outlined my whole life for the last year. I just listened to what he had to say, and it's like, we've seen this playbook in California. Victor, I'm friends with the California tribes as well. We've hosted them here at Potawatomi. They've seen our sports book. They've been super impressed about our venue, and I think our venue is, quite frankly, better than any Fandor or DraftKings or can put it up against them anywhere in the country. So and I'm not the only one that was offended. I mean, any Wisconsin tribe that heard that testimony is absolutely more than offended, insulting. I just got done speaking with tribal leaders of the other nations, Victor. They're here at my property, and I just came out of an hour meeting with them, and we are having the same conversation that we're having here. And I think it it shows their face, it shows their greed. And look, Victor, there's partners out there of tribes with FanDuel and the DraftKings, right? But
Right. I mean,
uh,
like the Flambeau, I believe, have a deal with DraftKings.
and that's a retail deal, and other tribes do across the country. But what you need to say is like, look, tribal leaders, understand that whatever situation that you got put in to choose that path, we understand. All we're saying is you should ask questions of who their lobbyist sports betting alliance is sports betting alliance hurting tribal sovereignty, or am I part of an organization that is out there undermining tribal sovereignty and uh, not continuing to be who they are? Are they really a wolf in sheep's clothing? That's what I seen, Victor.
Well, you listen, they've been very, you know, forward about what their intentions are. You know what I mean? I think they're in existential crisis mode too. And I think everybody's looking at prediction markets and we'll get to that at another time right now. But I think at this point with sports betting, they're saying, listen, this is a loss leader for us. We're gonna, this is what we need to go forward. Is there a path forward for them, Tom? Is there a way back, or or are we going to be dug in on opposite sides and we're at war?
Well, look, if SBA wants to give a tribe the lion's share, Victor, then there's a path, right? You guys laughing, you knew it. You just walked me into that one. You knew what was coming, but that's a
Right down
pretty
the
easy
middle.
answer there, Victor. So they
Other hand,
absolutely can. They just got to come in. Yeah, that's funny.
Right, but to understand that, I mean,
Yeah.
I agree there is a path, that when you look at the projected revenue numbers for internet or sports betting, and you look at the numbers for iGaming, because ultimately we're going to be having that conversation as well. I mean, and there's a whole lot of revenue there. When it really comes down to, and all these different fights with DraftKings and FanDuel's around the country, it's they want the lion's share of the revenue. And under IGRA, with the sole proprietary interest rule, the primary beneficiary rule, they can't have the 95.5 percentage deals that they have. It's here. We'll give you a bone. You go sit in the corner. We'll run everything, and and we'll write you a check for 5% of what we're actually taking home with us. You can't do that under the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. If they realize that working with tribes, to where there are opportunities where they can enter into agreements that comply with IGRA and comply with those rules, they still walk away with a good chunk of cash. And somewhere of 30 to 40% of something, as opposed to 95% of nothing, is yeah, I mean, that's the reality, I think, of what they have to look at if they really want to work with the California tribes. I mean, they've thrown out the 70% number, that they'll take 70% and give the tribes 30% in
wow.
California. Well, that doesn't comply with IGRA,
No.
and that doesn't, and it also doesn't comply with policy. I mean, they have the sense of entitlement, in states where the policy is to promote governmental gaming, where the revenue is used, to fund programs, not buy billionaires bigger yachts. Then and the other aspect of it is tribes aren't going anywhere. They spend that money locally. It circulates in the local economy. So if you want to look at the benefits of internet sports wagering controlled by the tribes, vis-a-vis the benefits of letting the SBA come in and take the lion's share of the revenue and use it however they see fit. It's not even a plausible debate. It's clearly better policy for states to work with tribes to make sure that this new form of gaming entertainment, benefits benefits the tribes in the state.
It feels like, and it reminds me of going back to the old days, because if we talk about Dominic and Potawatomi, they've chosen to go on their own and create their own brand. They said, listen, we don't want to be, and this is kind of the case in California, which is about erasure. You know what I mean? So they're saying, listen, if you want to join this, then you have to give up your brand. You know what I mean? We're going to come in and we're going to take all the oxygen out, and you're only allowed to compete in this, and with us in the market. You know what I mean? And that seems to be the edict that we get back again and again and again. And I think what we have here is like, are you going to be California or are you going to be Michigan? And whenever we talk about Michigan, we always talk, when we get to the bottom line, it's always shocking that how little of the money goes back to the tribes. you know and I think, Dominic, what does the Potawatomi brand mean to you personally?
Yeah, and look, Victor, I had the opportunity to go to Haskell Indian Nations University. I've been around these tribal leaders since 1995, and to me, that was when I seen that all of the ones that came before me set up this opportunity for me to be here, to get my education, to learn the experience, and to take the tribe's brand. And we have always been an economic power. We have always had some of the best leaders in the world. And what we see from a brand perspective, it's about our culture, about our identity, our ability to rebuild which from a lot that was taken from us. My dad talks about the missing generation in the boarding schools. My dad was a USMC Vietnam vet and scout sniper, and he had an opinion, and was a tribal leader for his people. So I think coming up under this framework that they trained us and educated us. It was those before us that gave us that power, that spirit, that vision that we wanted to be successful, that we can operate and be at this level. And that's what the brand means to me. It's more than a brand. It's a signal and the strength of our nations as we continue to rebuild our communities. I love seeing how strong the language and the song and the dance and the woodlands culture up here. We just hosted Hunting Moon Powwow and had over 800 dancers and packed the Baird Center in downtown Milwaukee. So yeah, it means more than just a brand or a logo, Victor.
Yes, 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 it does. Well, we have come to the point where we can do this on our own. I think one of the things is the messages that you sent me, this idea that we don't have the talent or we don't have the wherewithal to create this or do this successful. Where do you think that came from? I had an opportunity to talk to someone from the SBA this morning, and they were. I don't think they were too happy with yesterday's testimony, because I think it was not good for them to come that aggressive against the tribes and to say basically, you guys aren't, and we've heard this message before, right? You guys don't have the bench, the knowledge to do this right, and we're going to show you how to do it correctly. Am I right? Is that the message you got yesterday?
Yeah, look, he didn't like the way that goes. How do you think I feel about insulting my family, my culture, our religion, our sovereignty? I mean, you come in insulting us that we're not capable to do it, and that you're just going to throw that out there. And then at the end of the day, if you listen to what he said, he basically saying, we're going to lock you up in litigation and you won't get anywhere. Oh, so look, he's very crafty about how they presented their argument, but you got to understand who you're talking to, and where we come from, this is a life all my life, been around
Right.
tribal leaders and sovereignty. And you just come in nonchalant, didn't talk to anybody, and come in here and say, how dare you, without talking to us? And who do you guys think you are? Well, we think we're some of the best leaders in hospitality and gaming. I think we've proven that, have that track record. And, I like to believe I speak for a lot of Indian nations. I work for the Kickapoos in Texas. I work for the Sag Chips in Michigan. I work for my own tribe, the Prairie Band Potawatomi, and I can all say we're like-minded. I'm not alone in what I'm saying here. And we're not saying we can't work and be together in this market. We're not saying that, at the end of the day, it has to be fair for the tribes. We don't like scenarios where we feel like you're coming in to bully the market, take us out, and leave scraps for the tribes who have, built the gaming industry, provided jobs, provided rural communities. I mean, look at what the tribes have done here, man. Over 10,000 jobs and benefits in rural communities and churned the money over. The Forest County Potawatomi just invested $190 million in this property under our vision, and we are now setting the tone and become a regional giant. So the nation had to come together and band together to invest in their business and believe in the talent and the vision. So, look, I don't mind whoever's across the table. Digital's coming fast. We're going to deal with it. It's on our doorsteps. We're just saying, look, we want a fair chance to get started. We know we're not here to craft the world to our benefit. We're here to get a fair shot that we can build our capabilities, show the world that we can compete and continue to serve the markets like we do.
Dom, one of the messages that I heard back was that, the loyal opposition was surprised at the introduction of this bill. But if you read pachanga.net for the last couple of weeks, that we've been pushing these stories about online
Yep.
Wisconsin online sports betting bills, so that doesn't really play very well to me. What's your take on that? Where were they surprised? Did they have an opportunity? Did you guys, Shanghai them?
Yeah, look,
Can I even say that
it's
anymore,
been on the
Scott?
news for weeks. I mean, look, everybody in Wisconsin knew this was coming from a tribal perspective. So if you're, a global billion-dollar company, I would think you would understand the heartbeat of which markets are opening and not opening. You told us that you are the best in class and technology and have the best and smartest people in the world, better than Indian country, but yet you didn't know about this. So something don't make sense there, in my opinion. They had every opportunity to see this. They had, if they're as big and as powerful as they are, they certainly could have reached out. So I don't know what to take of that, Victor. But at the end of the day, what I hope is that California and the rest of the other tribes and other states and other markets pay attention to what Scott said, how he broke it down,
Oh, they're
what
watching right now. I
peeled
guarantee you.
peel back what SBA is doing, and they just stepped in it in Wisconsin. And you didn't know we got friends like Victor Rocha and California and yeah, I've been in this business for 28 years. I know a lot of people, so.
Well, you know what? Listen, and that was the purpose of this conversation, was to make sure everyone in Indian country was listening what's going on, because there are more markets, and listen, it's always been this uneasy alliance at times. And what happened in California was a real line in the sand, wouldn't you say, Scott?
Well, yeah, I mean, a comment on the branding side is, the those tribal brands, the reason they're so strong, is because, the integrity of the gaming product, behind them, and one of the frustrations that I have with the way the SBA seems to be picking and choosing what its message is, in a kind of a state by state situation, trying to come across as being the friend of tribes in these other jurisdictions, while coming out in the Wisconsin legislature and just being kind of brutally honest about what their agenda is, is a little bit revealing. In California, they both DraftKings and FanDuel's operate uh, daily fantasy sports, and committed to doing what the law says in California. Once the Attorney General issued his opinion, he had issued his opinion, made it clear that daily fantasy sports is illegal, and they're continuing to operate anyway. It's they talk about wanting to work with states, yet they're positioning themselves to be able to dive into the prediction market arena. If Kalshi continues to get away with what it's doing, the integrity of the tribal brand, doesn't seem to be translating into the SBA side of the arena. They don't seem to care about integrity. They seem to care about how they get the biggest piece of the pie, in every single jurisdiction, in the country. And so I think those issues are interrelated, and they're playing with completely unregulated markets, while it's the tribal gaming industry that crosses its T's and dots its I's when it comes to very specific, strict regulation and backgrounding and suitability determinations, et cetera. I still shake my head and saying, even if you were to do what DraftKings and FanDuel's and the SBA wants it to do in California, how can they pass a suitability determination, getting in the way they're operating daily fantasy sports in the wake of a clear opinion from the Attorney General that says what you are doing is clearly illegal in violation of California law?
You know what, Scott, as you're
Oh,
saying this, what we have here is a gaming Cold War. This is like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. This is Vienna, you know what I mean, in the 60s. And, we are saying we're not doing stuff, but underneath it, there's things going on. And, I think yesterday's testimony was a big step back for tribal relations with the gaming industry, especially with the threat of prediction markets on the regulated gaming industry, when I think the industry needs to unite together and fight. And there are relationships here, and there are opportunities here. And I think this just set it back a bunch. And all the good work that's happening in California and stuff like that, I believe that it just shows where with those of us who understand, again, like in the Cold War, you know what I mean? You're shaking hands, yet in the back, you're still trying to, dig out the foundation of the other person. And that's what this feels like. So you can agree. Applause, please.
no,
Applause, please. Just kidding.
100%. I mean, yeah, what you're seeing at the end of the day is, they're promising warm blankets, but
Oh,
behind
geez.
the scenes, what really is happening? You know what I mean? I mean, yeah, it's on the one front, they're providing money. Look, we appreciate SBA and any money that you give to educational and foundational support for tribes across the country. We're not saying we don't appreciate that, but we take actions at face value, and the actions that we're seeing have added up to a very similar playbook state by state, as Scott has clearly lined out exactly what happened in California, what's the comments that were made here in Wisconsin, and their approach and to the market. So I think it's time. I think this was always coming to the forefront, especially as I go around these conferences and I see them supporting awards for different organizations and things like that. Like you said, shaking the hand, but look, we're watching what's happening. You can tell us any rhetoric that you want at the end of the day, but we're stewards of the industry. We understand our sovereignty. We know that you just aren't happy with taking a small share and giving the lion's share to Indian gaming, and it's clear that that's under your purpose.
Wow. Wow. Well, you know what? Let's talk about, we have some good questions in here. And Valerie Spicer, dear friend, she wants to know, how will the Michigan hub and spoke model work, Dom?
Yeah, so look, under Michigan, they've already opened up, right? And they have commercial and
Yeah,
then
you have retail.
you can do retail and travel on your property. So it's already hub and spoke has already bypassed the Michigan market from that perspective from a tribe to be able to operate.
Yeah, because you're
Yeah,
already there, aren't you? Go
yeah,
ahead, Scott.
and a lesson to be learned from Michigan. I mean, timing is kind of everything. The Michigan tribes, did not have the benefit of the West Flagler litigation and the roadmap to be able to do it under IGRA. It's a state law model. The off-reservation internet sports wagering and iGaming is done under state law, to where, these, case in point, these agreements, these SBA members, they have, actually fairly good relationships with tribes in Michigan operating, their apps, including their brand names. But when you look at the math, when you look at where the revenue is coming from, those I mean those tribes, um, are paid such a small percentage of the net revenue that comes from those operations. It's really the dedicated economic money that comes back to the tribe from the state taxation of the sports wagering that provides a number of those tribes more revenue than they actually receive from their SBA partners. So is uh, you know, I think the Michigan tribes and the Arizona tribes doing what they did, the Connecticut tribes, all under the state law models before it became clear that you could do it under IGRA, before the West Flagler litigation, before the 293 regulation amendments came out. Um, you can look at Michigan as really, providing lessons of what we should avoid. And when you look at particular, and maybe Arizona is even a better example to look at at face value. You look at Arizona and you say, hey, the tribes have half of the commercial internet sports betting licenses, but they're getting about 5% of the revenue, and of that revenue, about 90% of it is going to the operators and not the tribes. And so when you really do the math, these state law models, which appears to be what the SBA would like to do in Wisconsin, um, don't equate to being a true net benefit for the tribes.
Well
Right.
said.
Yeah, Don, would you like to add to that?
He covered it down to the T. I thought talking about that how the just little that the tribes do share, and there is the opportunity for SBA and their lines to give that line share back to them if they really wanted to. They don't want to. And look, I don't think it's personal, right? It's not personal industry, it's business, and they're looking to get as much profit as they can. They're looking to get returns for their founders and their owners, and they're looking to open up markets to their benefit. So I would just say, to what end? Just be careful. This is an established industry with a long time history of treaties, compacts, and sovereignty that sit behind these gaming markets. So, long as we see that you're respecting that and coming to that table, we don't have a fight. But that's not what we're seeing, Victor. So
Yeah, it sounded like yesterday was a misstep, I think on their part, a
yeah,
very big misstep. And I think,
A
you
revealing
know,
miss.
yeah, well, Scott, and it's completely different in California because these guys already have retail sports betting. They're already in the market. They
yeah.
already have a product. They've already Dom has created a very strong product in Wisconsin and in where are you guys at again? Outside of Milwaukee. Sorry, my bad. I just drew a blank real quick. a beautiful property outside of Milwaukee. You know what I mean? So these guys have already established a brand. And so for them, you're asking, listen, if you want to join the market, we're gonna hobble you to come in. You know what I mean? You have to be hobbled. You have to, and they're saying, listen, we want to make sure that we're not smothered. Like you said, Scott, we get half the license, but only 5% of the market. It does not sound like a very good deal, you know? And that's not a good deal for you, right, Dom?
No, not at all, Victor.
Well, yes, and we have some more. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us, and I appreciate the questions. We have some really good questions, and thank you so much for putting your names there. I really appreciate, because if we have a conversation, I want to know who we're talking to, and that's why I kind of act irrationally to anonymous people, especially when they're talking smack about stuff like that. But some people, who are the SBA was one of the questions, Scott, and so the SBA is FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, Bet365, Fanatics. I think that's five. I think there might be a couple more in there that I can't remember right off the top of my head. What was interesting was that during California, they had a lot more tribes, excuse me, a lot more companies. And once that exploded, only three or four companies stayed to the core of it. FanDuel, DraftKings, Fanatic, BetMGM, and then 365 came in later, and they're in the market. So those are the ones that are really driving this conversation on that side of the aisle. But again, Michigan is different than California. Now, it seems like in Minnesota, they're definitely paying attention. I've been having conversations with people in Minnesota, and they're watching this also. What are the lessons, Dominic, do you think the tribes in Minnesota can learn from this?
You know that the opportunity for tribes to lay out the hub and spoke and be able to serve the markets where they've been serving for decades, that you should have the opportunity to operate in this market without that type of commercial pressure that's not going to give back to the tribes. I think what you see is that SBA is going to come in and try and open that market and put the tribe at a disadvantage, and bring what they have to the table in order to take that entire market into their hands, rather than being able to lay a pathway where the majority of the money can go back to the nations to serve those communities, to serve that state. I think the lesson is there's a great partnership to keep the money from a state perspective and a tribal perspective, to allow the operators in their market to compete and bring that home like we have always done.
But is it against their DNA to give you a good deal? I mean, if you look at their numbers, you know what I mean? They're like still in growth mode. There's, everyone, they just took a big hit because of prediction markets. And, the philosophy there is like, we were going to wait for them to grow, but now we have a new shiny bright object, and let's take our money out there and let's put it into this new thing. It seems like everybody's running into prediction markets now. You know what I mean? So it puts them at a disadvantage, and it feels to me that, you know, is there a deal there for them? Can they survive in this hub and spoke model?
And the answer is yes, if they give, the appropriate and let the tribe be the primary beneficiary. They just don't want to allow it. It's not that you can't, it's that you won't, right? It's that you won't. You're showing your face and showing your greed. You absolutely could give a smaller percentage to take your smaller percentage. Why don't you flip the script and give the tribe 97 and you keep three? There's still $100, 100% to be split up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they could still make, a whole lot of money working with the tribes in context and compliance with the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. I think at the end of the day, that's really, what this fight is about. And they throw out a lot of numbers and a lot of rhetoric to the California tribes, but when you peel it away, they're saying to the California tribes, "Well, okay, we want 70% of the revenue." Well, I mean, that's better than 95% of the revenue in terms of some of the deals they have out there. But it's certainly not in compliance with IGRA. It's certainly, the what gets me is that they can't they don't seem to be listening when we say just what Dominic said, that if you want to work in an environment to where the tribe's going to be the primary beneficiary, where that revenue, the bulk of that revenue, is going to stay within the state and spent by the tribal communities, as opposed to taking that revenue off and doing what you want with your shareholders, then there's still an opportunity for you to work with the tribes, work with the state, make a lot of money, but just not all of the money. And that's so if there's a message that they need to walk away from these conversations with, it's quit fighting the paradigm that the Congress laid down in the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, which has proven to work and work well. And if you work with the tribes consistent with those goals and objectives and consistent with parameters, there's probably still an opportunity for you to work in Indian country and make a whole lot of money. But going out and making the kind of statements that they're made to the Wisconsin legislature yesterday, and making the kind of rhetorical promises that don't add up in California, is just going to generate more and more ill will with the tribes. And and so yeah, if you want to fight a Cold War, the tribes are totally prepared to fight. But if you want to make some decent money and work with the tribes, within the paradigm that Congress and the compacts have laid out, then we don't need to be at war at all. We can work together.
Well, it just you said something pretty very profound there to me, which is, um, they feel that unless they have 70%, 90%, it's not a good deal for them. What reminds me of, Scott, you and I have been in this a long time. You've been there much longer than, no offense. You've been in there longer than I have. You were standing at the door when I snuck in, remember? And when we were negotiating deals, IGT didn't sit at the table with us. You know what I mean? IGT, Aristocrat didn't sit at the table with us when we were negotiating our compacts. And now it feels like there's this mission creep where these guys are now saying, okay, we are your partners. You are not, and that's kind of what the argument in California has been, which is like, no, you are a technology provider. You are not our life partner, or and that kind of this changing of these relationships with the industry is what you're seeing, and it creeping where now you're looking at prediction markets and they're saying we own you, period. Your laws, your state laws don't matter. Your reservations, your boundaries don't matter. We can't geofence anything. And I think what you've seen is these industries pushing more and more to become these forced relationships instead of business partnerships. And that's kind of what we're looking at here. And that's why I say I think a Cold War is an appropriate term for what we're seeing here.
No, but I think what we did here was we started a ripple. Okay. And this ripple here today is to let all of our tribal leaders and all of our markets out there do your research on SBA. Don't take our word for it. I think this will, Victor, this ripple will send huge waves across gaming and industry and articles that will come out and say, well, as SBA and their tactics, what have they done? What did they do when they went into Florida? What did you do to compete against the Seminoles? What were your tactics if you felt that you weren't going to get the market the way that you weren't, and that you wanted to make sure that you kept 90+% of everything? what were your tactics when you felt you were fighting a losing battle? Did you turn around in honor and let the tribes know, hey, this is a good plan, we support you? What happened? And I think those are the questions that today's just a ripple. That that question about SBA and what actions they have taken, I think will come out late at a later time in future. We're just opening the first ripple in the first wound right now.
Well, listen, I think the SBA was created to make sure these not the SBA was created to make sure these companies are together and pushing forward. They were created in the big push after PASPA, and it was to make sure they get the best deals. It's not to make sure the tribes have the best deal. It's make sure this business conglomerate owns the industry. You know what I mean? And so it wasn't created to be friends with the tribes. It wasn't created. Can they? That's where the Cold War comes in. You know what I mean? You're saying one thing in California, you're doing another thing in Wisconsin. And I think Damon Stewart, who was an attorney for Oric, was the guy who got up there yesterday. I think he just screwed the pooch on this thing. I think the relationships. I think it was set back. I think the aggressiveness that we see in Wisconsin is what we're seeing in California. It's just the tribes are very aggressive back too. So they're pushing back. But I think, you have to recognize what the SBA is. You don't, get a pit bull as a companion dog and expect it to be a lap dog. You know what I mean? That lap dog can turn around and rip your throat out. You know what I mean? So you got to understand what you're dealing with here. I think the SBA, they've been very clear in what they are and what their intentions are, especially if you look at what they've done over the last several years. They've been pretty honest about what they do. We're going to get the best deal for our members. And the tribes in California have fought back at that. And I think in Wisconsin, you're seeing the same thing. Obviously, I think you're right, Dom. I think this is a wake-up call
Yeah.
for not just Wisconsin, but for Minnesota and other states where this is still playing out, and especially in California. So, what do we have here in the comments? Again, everyone, thank you so much. There was a question from Randy about yes, it will be posted at IGA under the video will be posted last week's and the weeks before at the Indian Gaming Association on YouTube if you guys want to see. It usually takes about a day for them to get up. So if you guys want to review this video and see it and send it to the SBA, you'll be able to. Richard Armstrong, once IGRA passed and tribes began compacting, suppliers did not at any time become partners or competitors. They were relegated to the role of gamer resources supplier vendors. That's right, absolutely. Why do the big five sports platforms think they rate being tribal partners now in 2025? Sports wagering suppliers should remain vendors and not partners or competitors. That was from our friend Richard Armstrong. And Richard, that's basically the philosophy that the California tribes have, is that they shouldn't be a shotgun marriage. And I think that's what we see a lot of this, and that's kind of what we're seeing. I think again, what was his name again? Damon. Yeah, Damon Stewart. Yeah, I think Damon Stewart kind of stepped in it yesterday with the tribes. And so, Dominic, were you shocked that my inbox was blowing up and my text was blowing up? I was doing some other stuff at this testimony yesterday. Were you shocked at this aggressiveness? Saying that they're going to oppose you, and it's not even a handshake. It's basically a big F you, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Without consulting any of the tribes or the authors, and you just come in opposition and just gonna lay your groundwork. Yeah, absolutely. I think clearly misstep and showed their face from where they're at on this.
Right. So Scott, where do you think this goes?
Well, I'm glad to see this development. To give some context, as Dominic said earlier, this legislation, is just, one piece of the work the Wisconsin tribes have in front of them. What I do like about it is its elegance and simplicity. The what the DC Circuit made clear in West Flagler is that IGRA regulates and governs what occurs on Indian lands, and state law regulates and governs what's off of Indian lands, and this legislation makes it clear that the patron in Wisconsin can link to a tribal sports wagering app and not violate Wisconsin law. The legislation doesn't, fill in, what the compact's going to look like, how what the market between the tribes is going to look like, as some of the comments in the chat box point out, in terms of the regulatory pieces that they get together. The access and control of data has come up in some of the comments, and yeah, that's a very critical piece. Earlier I talked about sports wagering now and iGaming later, this just isn't about getting 90% plus of the revenue. It's also I think that the concern is that they partner with the tribe in the sports betting arena, then they take their power and their money and their dominance and create a bigger role for themselves in the iGaming arena when it gets to that point. And in the meantime, they've co-opted all the tribe's customer-based data as to their players, and those are critical issues that need to be considered at the negotiation table and at the contract negotiation table, and in the regulatory structure that the tribes put together to make sure that we preserve the integrity of mobile sports wagering in the same way that we've done it with brick and mortar casinos.
Yeah, and Scott, listen, if you don't control your data, you don't control your future. That's just it, period. You know what I mean? And I know Dom agrees with that too, but that is the big rub for me too, is because if you don't own your data, you don't own your customer. If you don't own your customer, you don't own your future. And that's just at the very fundamental. And so, and by the way, it isn't only FanDuel and DraftKings and the SBA that does it. It's other people in the industry that it's this very common practice is to keep the data. And, this is a big issue for my big issue in tribal gaming and a lot of our issues in Indian country is the fact, and this is the big rub, that still has to be figured out. And I think California and I think Wisconsin, we have an opportunity here to define these issues and figure this out. And, maybe Wisconsin is the lab we were looking for, that we could get some ideas through here that will work to the rest of the country and stuff like that. So, I hope the SBA realizes the error of their ways and they come back and back in a respectful manner and engage the tribes in the proper way instead of sending some legal flack out here to just screw up all their work, which is just tragic well, maybe not tragic, but you know what I mean. It's not tragic, is it, Scott?
I love what you said, Victor, about getting the that we could be, really that fundamental base for California. In my conversations with the Cali tribes, I'm always got this vision of saying, "Hey guys, why don't you come partner with Potawatomi Invest? I got number one retail sports book. Help us continue to build our tech stack to serve this market. And guess what? Why don't you be own shares in our business, invest, be a part of it, take my tech stack to California and get it ready. We'll run it, prepare it. You already know what you're doing, integrated to your loyalty, to your systems, and you can plug and play as a key operator." Because, one of the last things that I'll say about SBA about, just you seen at the end of the comments like, well, if we don't, vote no on this, then you're just going to try and lock it up in litigation and you'll be the ones to blame that this didn't get across the table.
That's
It's
shocking.
like,
That's shocking. That sounds like something I would say, not them.
I look like we might have heard some rhetoric like that, but at the end of the day, that is super shocking because what's happening right now, and you asked about Minnesota and states, we're under retail right now, and there's in order for us to be better at responsible gaming, I need statewide mobile to put my appropriate protection so that I can identify problem gambling. I mean, you got my hands tied with retail kiosks right now, and that's the only footprint. I can do mobile on premise, but we've seen that technology. At best, you get 50-50 handle across the board. And so really, and that was questions about responsible gaming. The best way is you need to let us move forward so that we can continue to improve on problem gambling and responsible gaming. And the best way to do that is to put this mobile platform over it. Got my hands tied with retail, and I really didn't get to make that case. But if that's who you are, I don't know how many fines these firms and SBA have had in other markets. Maybe Scott can talk about that. But I think we do well, and our gaming commissions are some of the best in the country. I've seen this and been around Wisconsin, and from Oneida to Ho Chunk and our own Forest County Potawatomi gaming commissioners. They are absolutely 100% behind responsible gaming, protecting the markets, protecting the people, and protecting the integrity of gaming as they've done for 30 years in Wisconsin.
Wow. Wow. Well, you know what? There is a lot here, and I think we're in the very beginning innings of this. I think the comment I had about being surprised by this legislation seems disingenuous when it's been plastered all over Pachunga.net for the last 2 weeks. You know what I mean? So this thing was telegraphed coming in. I think sending in this attorney from work was not a good plan if you intend on having relationships, and threatening the tribes is not a good plan because listen, we're watching around the country also, and it's our job here at IGA to watch this and make sure that everybody understands how this thing is playing out. So Scott, we're close to wrapping it up. We have some questions in here. Let me see if I can get some. I think Justin has been. Hey, Justin, thank you for your questions. You have some really good ones in here. We appreciate it. He's talking about the SBA. Um, you know what? This is Justin says the whole business strategy is anti-competitive to overspend on promotions to an unreasonable degree to bring in competitions to deep water and drown them in business sense. Justin, you sound like you're talking like us. I'm still cracking up at Scott saying a couple weeks ago he wants to see bodies floating down the river. I'm still laughing at your Pol Pot comment, Scott.
Well, that was in the context of sweepstakes, but it's and I was glad to hear Minnesota just
Right.
adopted.
Minnesota, the Attorney General just went after sweepstakes in Minnesota. As you know, Dom, we've been
Yeah.
been fighting that fight for a year now, and making great progress. Before I let Dom, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about prediction markets, man. So what are you thinking about this?
No, look, we're on the same page with you, right? When you look at how quickly this is coming, and it to be over all of our markets that we have regulated and operated ethically and provided all of our appropriate taxes across the board. We just look, it's just the expansion of prediction markets and the way that they have done it is really concerning.
Yeah. And Scott, it just seems very short-sighted when the tribes and the companies have such a commonality against prediction markets. And then, especially if it does go forward, we're going to have to partner eventually with someone. And, FanDuel and DraftKings are offering a product, yet they're trying to cut our throats in this. Why would we go? Why would we do business with them later on down the road? So I think it's very short-sighted. And I think they'll come to that same conclusion that I've come to. Uh, Dominic, I want to thank you very much, my friend. I appreciate it. It's always fun talking to you. I can't tell you how much I enjoy this. It's always fun to have your energy and to be around you. I know you did a wonderful job over there, and congratulations. As you know, big fan of what you guys are doing up in Wisconsin, and we really appreciate. And we will have you back. This is not the last time we're going to have this conversation, so we really appreciate you being here, Scott. Thank you, my friend. As always, I always know I can rely on you to give us a really solid take, a really solid foundation. I've been glad to call you my friend for almost 30 years. So I really appreciate it. And for everyone, thank you so much for joining us. It will be on the YouTube channel in about a day or something if you guys want to see it and spread it around. We really appreciate you guys joining us. And so again, thank you, Dom. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, viewers. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Talk.